So, Carolyn, do you want to go ahead and introduce your distinguished guests here today? Carolyn and John.
Do you want to do the honors?
Well, I think we should start with Dr. Robertson.
Well, we have several members of our team, but Dale Robertson, who is the head of the Grand Rapids Public Museum. See Dr. Fald. Mike Postumus, who is the representative for Grand Valley State University College of Education, working closely with Dr. Collins, Elaine Collins, who's the dean of the college. He's also been helping to serve in a role with the public museum as well on some of the work groups that we've had working to develop this application and all the work. Marilyn Merdzinski, who is, I'm not sure I know your exact title. Vice President of Collections for the Grand Rapids Public Museum. And we have a number of individuals from Kendall College of Art and Design of Ferris State University that couldn't be here, Cindy Todd, Carol Morin, who's served in a consulting capacity thanks to the generous financial support of Kendall. She was not able to make it today. She will be there for the September 2nd board meeting, assuming all goes well. And obviously, Ron and Rick. Ron's just getting more onboarded with the museum school, but Rick and Maida have been at the team with us from day one, along with Carolyn, and I came on somewhere in October of last year. So this thing is about 2 years in the making, and it's an honor and privilege for us to bring to you a draft of the Center of Innovation application as the first formal step toward the approval of the new Grand Rapids Public Museum School.
Before we start talking about the museum school, could we, because this is the first time in years that we've had a Center of Innovation proposal coming before the board, and I'm not sure, I know that John probably hasn't, but I'm not even sure if we've had a Center of Innovation proposal come since you've been on the board. So could you talk a little bit about just what a Center of Innovation is and how it ends up giving us some,
Yeah, a little bit of history. This actually stems back to University Prep Academy. You might recall there was a group of individuals, Brian Cloyd, John Kennedy, and a number of other individuals who had approached the district with this idea of the University Prep Academy based on a model in Detroit. But they were looking to be creative. At one point, they were going to do it as a charter. In fact, they had an application prepared and ready to go. We at the district and members of the board were able to convince them to do it with the district, because it's an opportunity to develop and cultivate public-private partnerships to develop innovative new school choices, but doing it within the district, not as a separate island of excellence that may be only available for those fortunate students who have the parents who are engaged, that have the wherewithal and the transportation means to get there. There's an economy of scale of doing it within the district, but then as importantly, about 10% of every per pupil dollar that we get, we know goes to cover the unfunded mandates of special education, English language learners. And so when you lose enrollment to a charter or an outside entity, it's not just impacting one school or one child, it actually impacts the whole. And the business leaders that were developing UPrep were open to that. They recognized the value of doing it with the district. And so we worked together to develop a process by which those interested individuals could essentially apply through the district to develop a new school choice in partnership with the district. And so that's where the Center of Innovation process came from. We worked together with a group of foundations and others to develop the actual Center of Innovation application itself. It is very similar to what you may see with a charter authorizer, where they have a pretty rigorous set of standards and a comprehensive, essentially, business and academic plan that has to be submitted for that school to be considered for approval. Well, I would like to believe that this museum school team took it to a whole nother level. And actually, we took that process, that application, which really hasn't been touched in, I don't know, five plus years, and went to work. And you had teams of representatives from those various institutions. So just to put those on the table at the highest level, you have Dr. Oliver Evans representing Kendall, Ferris State. You have Dr. Elaine Collins, who's the Dean of College for Grand Valley State University. Obviously, Superintendent Teresa Weatherall-Neal. Dale Robertson from the Public Museum. Greg Sundstrom, the city manager. And then somewhat secondarily, but certainly not to be overlooked, Chris Larson from Downtown Grand Rapids, Inc. And we'll explain that connection in a little bit. But those were kind of the 5 key leaders who helped provide direction and leadership to the team. And they had a team of representatives who were essentially their appointees, if you will, that served in various capacities from all those organizations. There's a committee structure. We've been meeting what seems like weekly, but monthly, if not sometimes is weekly, to put together the details of the application. And so that's what you see here before you today.
But Dr. Baker, I would like to mark, because so often urban districts are characterized by shifting from one initiative to another, but the Center of Innovation process has been one that we have really developed over time. And as John has stated, it is a process that has really improved with each iteration of the School of Innovation. And the focus has been not on just starting schools, but it has been on creating cutting-edge opportunities for our students, with the understanding that we want to remain competitive, but also with the understanding that we know that we can't deliver education in the same manner that we did 20 or 30 years ago. So the whole idea is innovation. And when we establish a school, part of the responsibility of the governing board is to protect innovation and to clarify the innovation. We have actually used the design process in doing so without even knowing it. We have gone back, we've prototyped, we've changed, we've made adjustments, but we have evolved the process with this experience being one that we are proudest of.
So and this committee hearing, I mean, this committee is hearing it as a chance to propose it or to send it on to the whole board for approval.
Yes.
That's right. Our goal today is to present you with this recommendation and to ask for you to approve it for full board approval on September 2nd.
Yes.
Okay.
So it is, I guess, twofold. It is for information, but it also is with the thought that it will go to the full board.
And so, thanks
Yes,
for
it's very
providing
exciting.
that context for this, so,
It's exciting.
all right. You wanna,
So what we thought we'd do is kind of touch on some of the high points, certainly dive into any details. We have been through this so many times, we can do it blindfolded in whichever way. But I think the part that's really important when you start right at the very front is around just the general executive summary that, you know, this is a cutting edge instructional model that that infuses the principles of design thinking with place-based education and really weaves them together in creating those real-life, hands-on learning experiences that will take full advantage of the artifacts, collections, and exhibitions at the Public Museum. The intent is for this school to open in fall of 2015 with 6th grade to start. That'd be 2 sections at the 6th grade level, so 60 students total. That would be housed at the Van Annel Museum Center. We have been working at length with the museum and with some of their consultants to look at the spaces that will be available, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But it'll eventually add a grade each year until it grows up to be 6th through 12th grade. We were looking at likely the 6th, 7th, and 8th at the museum, Van Annel Museum Center, where they have the space to accommodate that number of students at that site. And then we are looking at 54 Jefferson, the old Grand Rapids Public Museum facility, which Dale Robertson would tell you used to be part of Grand Rapids Public Schools back in the day. So history is repeating itself to some degree. And that 6th through 12th grade school obviously will be fully developed at that time. It will require renovations, multi-million-dollar renovations to that site. We are working through the details, certainly with the museum and the city of Grand Rapids. The city actually owns the facility and the collection, and they have a lease agreement, and there's great dynamics there in a good way where we've sat down and started to work it out. As part of the budget process, you will eventually see that we've worked out an agreement, a tentative agreement with our friends at the museum, where we're not just looking for something free. It needs to be something that's sustainable, but is also supporting their efforts and their educational programming. So within the first 3 years, the revenue that we will generate paying for essentially a lease as well as the educational programming will actually generate over $100,000 for the museum after year 3. It's about $35,000 a year. We will look at, once we get into 54 Jefferson, what more that may look like, and it's something we'll revisit on an annual basis. We have worked with Kendall and Grand Valley, where we're working to develop the professional development. Obviously, they help with Carolyn and our team put together this instructional model. And if there's any one part in here that is the nuts and bolts, and Carolyn can talk in more detail about that, it's the curriculum. This is really solid work that went into it, with a lot of pushing and pulling to really flush out what this instructional model looks like. How does design thinking and place-based work with museum practices? How do we bring those exhibits to life where the educational experience is not just in those 4 walls in a classroom with a teacher standing out front lecturing? How do we actually get the classroom taking place in the halls and exhibits throughout the museum, throughout 54 Jefferson, and potentially eventually the actual collections itself? There are 3 football field size warehouses, if you will, just stuffed full of collections. And Dale would tell you, they have one of the single largest collections of any mid-sized museum in the country. I think one of the largest in the state even. And so that's that hands-on learning. That's what the students will get to experience. The other aspects I would just note that I mentioned Downtown Grand Rapids Inc. earlier. This is the first K-12 school project ever invested in by the Downtown Development Authority. So another exciting aspect to this, and this speaks a little bit to the facility side, but the Downtown Grand Rapids Inc. has agreed to kick off this downtown master planning process. Dr. Falb serves on the DDA. Thanks for maybe some encouragement from her and others. They agreed to include the museum school and Innovation Central High in this downtown master planning process. Along with that comes consultants who are paid to work with us and the museum and our partners to develop a master plan for the facilities at both Venado Museum Center and 54 Jefferson. So by the end of this current calendar year, just this December, we should have an actual estimate for what it will cost for any kind of, upgrades at the museum center as well as the major renovations at 54 Jefferson. That would then lead us into really our fundraising mode and how we will partner with the Grand Rapids Public Museum on their efforts together, where we can join forces to look at how we raise those dollars, how do we develop it so that when we do get to that 9th grade year, that facility at 54 Jefferson is fully ready to go. I guess the other aspects I would just note, the financing, and this is something that on the budget, I already mentioned that our intent all along was to help ensure that there was support and revenues provided to the museum. We are also going to be looking at how can we be creative in supporting their services. One thing that you'll see under technology is that we have a full kind of IT department that they don't necessarily have at the museum. So we've made that as one of the things we've put on the table is how our staff can help support the museum, not just for the school, but for the museum as a whole. And so those are kind of unique creative experiences we think that further kind of stand out in this school project. But on the budget itself, we were very intentional in wanting this to be sustainable based on our existing local, state, federal dollars. And while on the early years it does take, there's a little bit of a startup cost, if you will, but as you will see as the years go on, it actually starts to generate a surplus. And you know, it's a model we're going to continue to work on. We do know that if we were ever successful in passing a bond in the coming years, that we can use those dollars to invest in 54 Jefferson or other facilities as long as we have the appropriate wording in the ballot language. So we've really investigated everything we can. We do know that this is going to be kind of a startup process, and that every year we're going to have to revisit the budget, revisit the plans, look at the memorandum of understanding, and just make whatever slight tweaks that will be necessary. But you know, we're also building off the very successful fifth grade immersion program. This was part of one of the catalysts to the school, and was this grand history lesson that the museum received a grant from DTE Foundation for, and that allows for fifth graders. This was piloted in a certain number of schools. I think we had 12 schools to start, and now we're up to 24, where fifth graders from those schools spend a whole week immersed in the museum, where the teacher actually develops lesson plans specifically to utilize the artifacts, the collections, the exhibits. And so, and then we've incorporated the design thinking principles into that as well. And so you've already got this base foundation built where our teachers have been professionally developed and supported, students have had the exposure, and we already have built a talent base by which we may be able to find the next the new principal or the next teacher for the school. So we've been mindful of how do we cultivate the talent for when we have to grow the school all the way up to 6 through 12. And of course, you're also creating essentially built-in recruitment of students, because those students hopefully will have that exciting experience, and will use that to want to apply once they're done with fifth grade. So I'm going to stop for a second. Carolyn, are there things you want to talk about specific on the academics and the curriculum?
Thank you so much. I'm going to probably divert just a moment, and I'd like to begin by thanking you, Dr. Baker, for your vision, because I know that you started off with this vision about what could happen down at the museum, and when we first heard about it, we thought, oh my God, I don't know about this, I don't think kids or I want to do this. But with each visit, with each meeting, we became more excited about the possibilities, and we do feel like we're on the cutting edge. We think that we are on the cusp of coming up with something new and valuable and meaningful for our students, and not just a pocket of students, but we believe that we can grow excellence through this experience. So we feel very supported through Dr. Robertson and Dr. Falb and yourself. We've not seen that kind of collaboration from what we call the big three before, but we have certainly gained through this experience, and we're just I'm honored and excited to be a part of it.
Well, it sounds like you guys have had a lot of fun, too.
Oh, we have. And we've developed many wonderful relationships as a result of this. I'm going to use the right part of my brain just to kind of move us around this document, because I'd like to begin with what are our goals. I'd like to begin there. What are we really attempting to do? So on page 30, I would like, if you don't mind, and while you're turning to page 30, I'm just going to note that you have a paper document that we will collect and reuse for future presentations.
Good timing.
Green Grand Rapids Public Schools.
We did not want you to think that we were being wasteful, but we knew that this was...
sustainability committee. This causes all kinds of problems.
This is quite a lengthy document, however, so we wanted to make sure that you could follow along with us easily. So I'm going to start with the end in mind, and that's our performance goals. And right in the middle of that document, it begins by stating what we hope to accomplish. And I think we're making some pretty bold statements, and I won't read those performance goals for you, but we are, in fact, stating that we expect our kids to be at or above the 50th percentile as measured by NWEA. And we also expect our students to be at or above the 50th percentile using a state measurement. And we don't quite know what that is yet, but we know that we will continue to use NWEA, the Conditional Growth Index, which compares our students to other students that come in with the same level of skill. But we will also compare them in relationship to their attainment of proficiency. So we will be looking at them in two ways using both of those measures. Okay? So I think it's a rigorous but it's a good goal. So I'm going to go back and we'll start with curriculum so we can begin to talk about how we believe we will get there. You know, every school can end up being just like the next school if we don't have certain things in place. And key to that is the curriculum and the pedagogy that supports the curriculum and the culture. So we put a lot of time and discussion into what the curriculum should look like, understanding that our kids have to compete. And we don't want to start a school that and educate kids in a way that they would not be competitive on state measures or district measures. So up front, we had to make the decision that yes, we will embrace the state curriculum, but we will use the ideologies of place-based education where context is a strong influence. We would also use design thinking, where there is, and I'd like to say in design thinking puts an emphasis on the process of innovation just as much as the emphasis is on the actual innovation itself. And project-based education, and also transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary education. Now that's a lot, and when we look at that, we think, we started to think, are we out of our minds? I mean, that's a lot to put on anyone's plates. But we began to think through, well, what is this relationship between place-based education of the museum setting and design thinking? What is that? Well, how do we see that actually connecting? And when we made that discovery, it's when we became most excited. Because I see you, Dr. Baker, with your students all around the city, and you're trying to give them a historical perspective of current issues on and on. We believe that through our experiences with the museum, with place-based education, we put our students in the unique position to not only innovate, but understand problems or needs for creativity with a historical lens. So you're not just creating to create, but you also create with the added advantage of wisdom, of knowing what has worked and what has not worked, of where this city or this population or this earth has been in the past. It is information that we usually, and connections that we usually strive to attain with our college and university students, but we are saying that we believe that we will be able to attract a curious group of students who will appreciate having the perspective, a historical perspective, an example of the river and what we see in the river now and what the future might hold for the river. We believe that we will be able to attract a group of students that will be able to make those connections, and they won't only make them, but they will appreciate and innovate as a result of those connections that they are making. So how do we put all of those things together? I think it comes together more naturally than we probably thought when we first started this process. Because creating for the future without having a sense of our histories really leaves a void in our understanding. And what we're saying is we're going to be intentional through using the artifacts of the museum, the access to many of the sites around our city, to begin helping our students develop the context for their innovations that they will engage in as a part of the process of learning. We will, as I stated earlier, use the state curriculum. But at a high level and an organizational level, place-based education, design thinking will be a strong influence of this process of learning. We think that it will be characterized by opportunities to reflect, create, and critique. It will be characterized by real-world experiences, opportunities for collaboration, opportunities for research individually and as a part of a team, for making connections, as I stated before, historical to current to future, for making effective and using technology effectively and not as an event, and for honoring and creativity and innovation. We believe those will be the kinds of things that will be evident in the model as we peer into our future classrooms. On page 16, there is a list of characteristics or statements that characterize our beliefs about this model. I won't read them for you, but I would like to comment on the process of coming up with the statements. We didn't just kind of pull thoughts out of the sky. We spent numerous hours and meeting times coming up with what we believed we value in a learning environment of this nature. So you have numerous comments, and we believe this begins to frame our values as we bring on new staff, as we communicate with parents and our community, as we discuss teaching and learning with our students. We believe that this begins to articulate what we value in this particular environment. So I'll stop there. Are there any questions at this point?
No, this is great. I like this list.
Yeah.
There is a lot to digest, and I had a hard time coming up with where I would stop. But it begins to, so then I'm going to leave that for your reading, but I would like you also to, if while we're flipping pages, if you would go to page 33 and 34, where we begin to talk about the school culture.
You know, when I think of, I was at a meeting in which an artist was describing how they're through Link, they've started an opportunity where artists can actually display their art, and what has occurred is that a few artists who in fact have been doing it for a long time and have never shown their work are actually getting an opportunity to do that, and in that they're discovering that there's some great art in that. I certainly see the potential of this school to connect to the community, and you know, often when we go to museums we find it very sterile because of the great art that's there, but centuries old and so forth. And so to be able to connect that, and certainly art is one of the few forms that communities get connected together, because it's such an expression in all its pottery, painting, all those things. So to be having something like this, where we're going to be able to dialogue, certainly with parents, community, and so forth, and with the many things that are happening in our city too, Art Prize and so forth, that's really developing the eye of the community and the city as well. So it's exciting to see you talking about youth thriving communities, educators, the community itself engaging in that process. So
Absolutely. We all know that the culture of the school actually characterizes the school and forms the personality of the school. So we wanted to be very intentional about how we develop the culture of this particular setting. Culture is everything. It shapes so much of what we experience and our perceptions. So we spent a lot of time talking about what are the things that we want to see in the culture of the school. Now, we've had numerous conversations with Harvard University, Dr. Lemons, on and on, about how do you really develop culture within a setting. And it's a question that continually challenges us, but we've spent a lot of time thinking, and there are some things that we know influence the culture, and we wanted to be deliberate about using those kinds of things as a leverage. We began by identifying what we're calling the learner profile, or characteristics that we want to develop in our students, because we know that one of the things that influences culture is, first of all, our discourse and conversation, but our patterns of behavior. So we wanted to be very careful about identifying patterns of behavior that we want to see in the school. On page 34, there is a list that we have entitled our learner profile. It starts off with empathy. We believe that's important in the 21st century. Effort, or effective effort. Perseverance and grit. Curiosity is important to this school. Social intelligence. We need to know how to appreciate differences and celebrate them. Social responsibility. We all have a responsibility in the social efforts of this world. Self-management. We know that that's going to be a huge need in the design model that we are going to utilize. And then one of my favorite, integrity and being just prepared. Integrity. So often we get kids in our environments, but we don't hold conversations about the importance of things like integrity and being prepared. And then we're also going to embrace a growth mindset. We believe we can grow intelligence. Kids get smarter when they experience, and they're engaging in these rich experiences that we believe they will engage in over time. We looked at 4 ways in which we hope to begin embedding the culture or establishing the culture of the school. The first one is most important to me because it says teachers and adults as models. We believe this is absolutely important, that we're on the same page about the learner profiles. We have embraced a common vision of what that should look like, and teachers and the adults in the building are being asked to model those beliefs. Model being prepared, model integrity, model persistence, social intelligence, on and on. The second way that we hope to establish the learner profile within the culture is through awareness and through instructional opportunities. So we won't be afraid to mark certain behaviors when we see them. I won't be afraid to say to Dr. Baker, thank you for demonstrating that kind of integrity or honesty or persistence or not giving up. Through doing that, we think that we're allowing our discourse to carry and influence the culture of the school. When we say we're going to use instruction, we don't believe we'll sit kids down and just say, you have to be integrity. How do you have to use integrity? How do you spell it? That's not what we're talking about. But we believe through our curriculum, kids will learn about stereotypes. They will learn about, they will use the characters in the literature that they are exposed to. And as we study the character's point of view, as we talk about things that influence the growth of the character, we will be able to mark some of these characteristics. So the first way will be through our modeling, the expectation that the adults will model. The second way is through awareness. We will mark it, we will name it, we will talk about these character traits, and then we will embed it into our instruction. We will connect it to our academic outcomes. That is very similar to the instructional piece. We believe that throughout our curriculum, there are many, many opportunities to help kids to gain insights into the learner profile characteristics. And we also think that in the process of completing some of their projects and working in groups, that they will have many opportunities to persevere. They'll have many opportunities to collaborate. They'll have many opportunities to grow their intelligence. And then finally, we believe that a strong parent partnership is absolutely essential. We have an interview process in place for our parents, and we want our parents to know up front, these are our values. These are the values of the school. These are the characteristics that we believe are important to our world and our community in the 21st century. And we want them to know what they're signing on for with our school. So I know there is a lot in this packet, and certainly I don't want to go into any more detail, but I'd be happy, and I know John would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I have just a couple quick logistical questions. One is, actually this might not be quick, is how will the museum setting be used for the other core curriculums such as math and reading? I know that's discussed in the packet.
Well, I see the museum influencing the teaching and learning more at the conceptual, at the unit level. There will be times, Dr. Baker, where we want to be very honest, and we stated that in the pack, where direct instruction is going to be appropriate. It's the most efficient. It will allow us to get to some of the thinking that the museum will offer. So it's not, the museum at that time for a math class doesn't have to influence the instruction, but I would like to also say it could.
Okay.
Because if I'm engaging in math and there's something that the museum can offer, then certainly having a real life example would make it more meaningful to our students.
I think that's a great way to answer the question. So logistical questions. So who will the school, because these are like just logistical questions that people are asking. Who will come to the school? You know, how many students? You know, is it testing, et cetera?
So it will be a center of innovation, so that it will be through an application process, just like it is for UPrep and the other 4 centers of innovation. That application will open, we anticipate mid-October, and so we'll start taking applications starting this fall. It will be done through a random computerized lottery process. With one caveat, we did build from Gerald R. Ford Academic Center. That process is a very rigorous process that goes beyond just a simple application. There is a parent compact that's required, and there's essentially parent interviews that are conducted, and we are intending to implement that model exactly with this school. There is going to be a level of rigor and expectation, and we want to make sure that there's a recognition by the student and parent what they're getting into with this school. As it is limited to 60 students per grade. There would be a waiting list process, just like we do with all our theme schools and centers of innovation. A couple other logistics. We will be providing regional or theme school transportation for the middle school only. And then the students at the high school level will, just like our other high school students, get access to the Rapid. That would rely on that service as well.
start time that's later than usual. For this age group, I just want to applaud that.
Oh.
Because I
What's the
saw the
start?
comment in there that, we know that older kids need to come to school later, and that kind of class is 6. So I'm pleased just to see that in there, so I know that you thought of a lot of things, to even include that in there. You got to have your brains going all the time, so it
We're all-
looks great.
Yeah, we'd also add that we'll be, at this point, following the students, obviously, our students that live within the city of Grand Rapids, within the GRPS boundaries, 85% of the seats are held for those students, another 15% for out of county, and that's something that we recognize. There likely will be interests of students that live outside the city of Grand Rapids, but our primary constituency, of course, are those students and families in the city of Grand Rapids,
Whether or not they've been in GRPS prior to.
whether
Right, of
they're in
course.
the city, yeah.
Okay.
In the city.
So it seems like, since you brought people here, other than just looking good in their clothes, so Dale looks much nicer than I usually see him. But, actually, I have to say, he is definitely one of the best dressed runners I've ever met. So he has a nice scarf. You're not a runner, Wendy, sorry. Well, yeah, you are, so anyway. He has a scarf that he wears in winter. He's really dapper when he runs, so anyway, but looks much more professional today, so. Can we hear from the team? And I'll have to say this, I think that it's been said before, is that this is an incredible proposal overall. It's just like a great, I mean, the technical issues, the philosophy, the history, the information we need to know is really great, so.
Really well planned out.
So. Why don't we let Dr. Falb introduce the guests?
Well, several people aren't here that, where I was working on the curriculum team, and several people aren't here that worked on it, Carol Moore and Cindy Todd, as well as Carolyn, but, I have to give a shout out to this guy. He's pretty amazing. I tapped him right when we talked about the later start time. He has such a really imaginative and ethical perspective on teaching adolescents and what that means in regards to play space. And he is a GRPS grad, Blandford City, where my kids are at, and his GRPS family.
That's right.
Mom worked for GRPS, so this is a project for
Oh,
her too.
that's great.
I think we all learned a lot from each other, and I learned a lot from this guy, so it's my job.
Who wants to go first?
That's
why I
waited.
I don't know if I need to do this for the record or not. When I was in the state, working in the state legislature, Dale Robertson, Grand Rapids Public Museum. And thank you for
Very
the
good.
opportunity to speak. I am trained as a lawyer, so you get me in front of a public body and a microphone. I gotta go.
Get it closer so we make sure it gets on So.
And the scarf, yes, I will say the scarf is a Robertson tartan scarf. Right, so there's meaning behind it. And there is meaning behind this whole project. So bear with me, if you will, for a few moments. Some of you have heard this before. I'm not from here. I'm from downriver Detroit. Okay, so I give myself 2 licenses. I get to talk frankly about where I'm from, right? I can criticize my brother, but you can't, right? But I also get to tell those of you who are make your home here and have been here honest things about you, because I have none of the West Michigan humility that comes with growing up here. Okay, so I come from growing up 8 miles from the largest museum in the state of Michigan, to moving here and now working for the 2nd largest museum in the state of Michigan. Okay, unlike that largest museum in the state of Michigan, they bought most of their collections. This museum, okay, in the spirit of West Michigan people, we have no like budget for acquisitions. All right, this museum is only Henry Ford Museum's larger than ours, 250,000 artifacts and specimens by the most conservative count. So let me just give you context. The Riddell Drugstore in the streets of Old Grand Rapids. Okay, most museums will count every counter, every bottle, we count that as one. The drugstore is one. Okay, so 250,000, I say conservative is conservative. Virtually everything we have was given over 160 years by the residents of West Michigan to this community for the highest and most noble good, in my opinion, which is education. Right? The museum was originally part of, 10 years in, the Board of Education, the public schools. It was a superintendent of schools that got some high school students together with John Ball and a group of businessmen and said, you got to take this museum that you started and connect and make it something bigger. Right? And then since 1904, we've been part of the city of Grand Rapids. So the city of Grand Rapids holds title to all the buildings, all the land, and all the collections. Now, the foundation that I work for is responsibility for operating it and so forth. But the point is the artifacts and everything we have been given by the people, for the highest and best use. And now we have this opportunity with this school partnership to take it to, as John had cutting edge and Carolyn's used it, to take it to another level. And have there been museum schools before? Sure, Henry Ford has a museum school. And so the group looked at it. But the difference is going to be through the partnership with Kendall and the College of Education at Grand Valley is a curriculum of design thinking and placemaking where, you know what, you get to explore and you get to think and there are no rules and you get to make mistakes, and mistakes are good things because you learn from mistakes. Right? And you collaborate and you connect and you learn, you get skills, and there's going to help you in college and beyond. It is that well-rounded kind of experience. And we also know that we want to try to accommodate, and that's where all these folks come in, the broadest range of learners that we can. We have a theory at the museum, or a goal that we strive for, that we want to be as physically and cognitively accessible to the broadest population that we can. So we've embraced that Temple Grandin. It takes all kinds of minds, that no matter how you learn or need to learn, we want to accommodate you. And that's spilled over into and has informed the school. And I would argue that the design thinking and the placemaking theory accommodates that nicely. So the goal here is to take all that has been given by the people of West Michigan for West Michigan and then use it in this partnership that is going back to history for that highest and greatest good. So that's really the goal behind it. And then it was up to these folks then, to figure out how to do it and take it and make it real. And frankly, how they did it and how they came up with it is beyond what I can describe to you, because they're the ones that actually did it. So and Wendy, I know, was a key part of the entire. She's here. I'm glad she came here today because she was part of the group that put this together. Once an educator, always an educator, right? And so thanks to all of them. But that's kind of the big picture here of trying to bring it all together and use a resource that I argue is unique in this entire state. Nobody's got a collection as broad and diverse as we have in my opinion, and provided in the way that's been provided, and is literally from all over the world. Okay, we literally have collections from all over the world. So here we go and get to create something that I think is unique and truly
I'll just add something real short on this. Dale, you remember, Tony, we went through the archives with my son Peter, and Dale gave a similar speech, and he said, these archives belong to the children of Grand Rapids. And Peter came home and said, does that really belong to me? And it was that sense of ownership, that this vision that Dale had, that we need to have access not to the museum building, but to these archives, to the children of Grand Rapids. And I know it's something Carolyn has talked about. We've talked about how not only will we expand access, but what those archives will be in the future will be impacted by the children who attend this school. So children can look at the archives from their own lives and their own communities and see what is of value that tells their history and their place of meaning. And so that will change what the institution becomes and reflect more of the communities of Grand Rapids. So that's a huge part of the vision of the school. So.
I will, excuse me, try to make my comments brief. So representing the College of Education at Grand Valley State University, I think what has been particularly exciting is to be a part of a chance to innovate a new way to teach students and to be able to research and embed College of Education faculty and students in the ongoing process in an effort to continue to improve education in the Grand Rapids Public Schools. And so being able to represent that, particularly through the lens of place-based education and academic service learning, is kind of where I fill a niche in this team. And it has been a goal of mine. My background is in place-based environmental education, but understanding how place-based ed can be used in context of any discipline and any part of our world. I believe it gives the museum school an opportunity to do things that are not being done regionally, possibly nationally, yes, but we do not have the model here, and I think it is something that is in the best interest of learners for this, for Grand Rapids to understand that there is a different way to approach education, and that it is a way that will reach students and maybe meet them at a place that they haven't been able to find yet in their education experiences. And so oftentimes people ask what really is place-based education. There's a misunderstanding that it means like learning at a museum or at a nature center, but really place-based education is approaching local relevant and applying that understanding to global context, which I think is often misunderstood or overlooked. And that is a mission of the College of Education, is to provide that global context, but using the local relevant information is what is often overlooked. We teach ecology through rainforests when we have the Great Lakes out our back door, so we need to be able to capitalize on that. And this curriculum allows us to use our community as a classroom. I had a teacher that used to say the living textbook. And I like that terminology because it helps people understand that the world that we live in is ripe with learning opportunities, and all we have to do is take advantage of what's there. And I believe that this instructional model and this curriculum will truly do that in a way that other programs are not in this community. So we're excited to be a part of it and continue to work with GRPS and training teachers, working with administrative staff, and really helping inform our own community about how this education model is different and how it can benefit students. So thank you for allowing us to be a part of it and to offer this proposal to you.
Yeah, thanks for your contribution.
I'd like to just say a couple things. I'm not an educator, but I've been on the team since we've started a couple years ago. But I have been at the museum for over 35 years, working in the museum's collection division. And as John was describing earlier, and what Dale has also commented on, we're looking at, this partnership and developing this school as a way of furthering the museum's mission and making the museum a better place, living up to expectations of the community. What the museum is all about is collecting, preserving, interpreting, and presenting things that are important, history, science, and culture. And the opportunity of working with GRPS and our other partners from Kendall and Grand Valley College of Ed has just made that shine. The museum is living, I think, to its highest standards. We're looking at how to be good stewards, making sure that we preserve all of these things for future generations. It's not, when we're charged with collecting and preserving, it's not about using it all up and making it all about us, those that are currently living today, but to make sure that they're still around for the future. But also what we're looking at doing with the school is finding a way to still be good stewards, but provide, as much access as we can, for the common good and to help educate kids in the community. So it's really been a very exciting time for the museum, and it's helping the museum be a better institution.
If I could have one more statement, in relation to what Dr. Faub mentioned in terms of, I guess, individual effort by people, I think it's important to understand that the product of, this large document in front of you is, would not be possible without each individual's contributions. And, what I can provide to this team is only as good as what I learn from the other people around me. And I think that's what makes this project particularly powerful, is the confluence of all of these great minds working together to create something that truly we believe represents a student-centered school. And that is why this is a very powerful experience. I think it'll offer students a powerful experience, and it was really a powerful experience to be a part of, because you see the potential of what West Michigan offers when we put great thinkers together. So.
Well, I think that this is actually kind of I would say, a special moment. So the coming together of the public entities. And Dale, I want to thank you again for your energy and enthusiasm as you have this conversation. I know that there were lots of conversations that got us all to be able to have this collaboration together, and a lot of talk with your board and et cetera, and so the public museum. But it is an incredible public partnership, and so it's, it is, I think that I like your Peter's comment, it's like if our children can grow up owning the city and its stuff, then that's what we do in Grand Rapids Public Schools. So anyway, it's great. Thanks, Dale, for opening it up to us. So
Give a shout out to Dr. Gonal as well. She's been on the team.
yeah, all the team. I would.
And Rick. Late comments, but we'll acknowledge.
I would give shout outs, but I'm actually just resentful that I wasn't a part of it. So, because it sounds like the coolest thing that's happened over the last couple of years. So anyway, but it started with you. So do we guys want to move it towards the whole board?
You betcha.
I would say yes.
Okay, so I think that, John, did you want to add anything else? Okay. All right, well, I think that we have chosen to move it to the whole board for their review. So,
Great, thank you.
is that a formal vote? I don't know if we don't actually usually do formal votes. No, we all, all right, thanks a lot.
Did you want Louise to say?
Yeah, actually, Louise, I did make a.
They have to stay. I understand that they wanted to go somewhere else. They can go somewhere else.
Thanks so much for everything. So
Thank you.
hopefully this won't be. Do I need the thingy? Okay, so all right, so we'll implement the 3-minute rule. We'll assume that Louise has got it. So please announce who you are.
And I apologize for coming after, hearing about this lovely program. And I started writing things down because I said, I'm Louise Wilson. I was glad to hear about academic achievement and you guys were talking about sustainability for the long term and consideration for long-term supportive programs, because that's what I'm here about. I also, by the way, was really glad to hear, apparently they're talking about, teenagers starting later on in the day, because I keep saying, we're not data-driven until I see the teenagers starting after 9 o'clock in the morning. I don't know why we're not doing that. Sorry, still don't. But the program that I want to talk about is the inclusion of technology throughout the district for school achievement. The paper that I've given you that looks like this, these are quotes from the district's technology plan for 5 years, I think it is, maybe 3 years. And I just went through and pulled out some of the quotes that they have. Particularly, it says the district goal is 15 hours online for secondary students. And if you think they're in school 30 hours a week, that means half their time. And we in math certainly have deliberately included learning and training on software that is really important now for students going to college or in professional environments. They're expected to be able to run Excel and Word. They're expected to be able to look up electronic textbooks. They're expected to use electronic drawing, like Geometer Sketchpad. We have all of those. And you've recently renewed the It's Learning license for Innovation Central. Right, so all of these things go towards that goal. Not a problem. Here's the problem. We can't implement these if we don't have working computers. And we have lots of computers. Okay, our school has lots of laptops bought with Title I and Title IIB dollars, but there's no maintenance money. Now, if you look at the plan specifically says that all of those costs are going to belong to the school. Okay, so you just put in, you've got a budget every year of $2.5 million to maintain the sort of the infrastructure. You recently updated our Wi-Fi connections at Innovation Central. But if we don't have the laptops that connect to them, it doesn't matter about spending that money. And we're not necessarily talking about a lot of money. I've given you the repairs that I need for the laptops that I use. I've got 3 carts, which are 17 computers in each cart, but I only have 20 working computers in that because they need new keyboards, which are $29 each. It's got to come out of the school budget. Well, when you're a principal and you're going, do we put in new keyboards for the computers or do we buy toilet roll? I guess you buy toilet roll. And it's really sort of like the state brings unfunded mandates down to you. And so this is like an unfunded mandate for the schools. And it's not just my school. Otherwise, I wouldn't bother being here. This is all the schools. Right? I'm hearing from all the schools. This is the problem we have, is there isn't a maintenance budget for these things. I see that the district has a goal of 1 computer per 5 students in secondary school. Well, I just told you that the goal is 15 hours out of 30 on computer. So I don't see how the 1 in 5 works for that. If half the kids are on the computer at any given time, we need 1 to 2. We don't need 1 to 5. I'm really concerned that when I hear new programs, they sound great, that there's no long-term funding. In one of the quotes from this plan, it says the plan is to replace portable computers every 3 to 4 years. Clearly, that's not going to happen. But gosh, if we can spend $100 a computer to keep them updated, the desktop computers, it says replace every 6 years. They don't need replaced. They do need some memory. $45 for a computer, because we've got a lot of teachers who have desktop computers. They take 2 hours to load up. Well, the IT guys told me, because I don't know, yes, if you get an extra set of memory, all right, for $45, they'll be just fantastic. But we don't have that. There's nothing in the budget. And I'm going, heck, as a teacher, if you said to me, give me $45, I'll upgrade your computer, I would give them the $45. I need this for a tool. I can't do anything anymore on a school desktop computer. I don't even have one in my room. Is that we have some laptops that we have for running the whiteboards. I use that. And people who are still running desktops, they're going, how do you do it? They don't ever turn their things off because they can't turn them on again. That means they never get their software upgraded. And I really would like you as a board to consider this is about our kids and their academic achievement. Because when they leave Grand Rapids Public Schools, if we never teach them any computing skills, there are very few jobs they can function in. I mean, I look at my own kids. Right now we have 5 computers at home for 2 people. When they grew up, they had their own computer. They got that. My kids in school, fewer than half of them have internet access at home. So I want you to think about that. All of these things that we talk about, fewer than half of them have internet access at home. We have to give it to them at school. When they go to college, that's their one thing when they come back. We didn't know how to run this. We don't know how to do it. Everything is online. We don't know how to do that. And if we can't give them, for $30 a computer, bear in mind a computer's being used by 6 students a day, for $30 a computer, we're not fixing it up. I just find it breaks my heart. Because having all of those there as doorstops isn't helping our students. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Liz. All right,
Great.
meeting is adjourned. So.
And our next stop is.
Yeah. City.